Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Brooklyn Community Board 14's Lunch and Learn series, where we go ahead and we provide presentations about community, public space, housing development, land use, and the built environment. This is the third segment of our series. If you've missed the other two, you can find them on our YouTube channel. That link is on the CB14 website, and if you're not looking at the website, you're missing a whole lot. The first presentation, the first part of this series, we spoke with the Department of City Planning, who gave us a 101 on zoning. And last week, we had Citizen Housing Planning Council of New York City give us a great presentation on what the status of housing is in our district. And today we are so fortunate to have Housing Preservation and Development, Uriah Johnson, who is a neighborhood planner, and also joined us for our youth conference, which was amazing. And thank you so much for being there.
Yes, of course.
So we look forward to hearing her presentation today about our housing stock, the affordability and maintenance thereof. So without further ado, let me present Uriah Johnson. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you guys for having us and allowing us the time to go ahead and share some of the preservation efforts that HPD does. So I'll share my screen again. Can you all still see my screen? Is that okay? Okay. So thank you once again. So I'm going to start off our presentation because we are still deep in outreach for our PS 90, or excuse me, Flatbush African Burial Ground Task Force outreach, redevelopment, and I just want to share that the questionnaire for that project is still open, and we've actually extended it because we are having a third workshop with the community, and that workshop is scheduled for June 30th. But in the meantime, we're asking folks to go ahead and get on to the FabGer website to learn more about the project, fill out this questionnaire, and I'll plug in and do I'll plug it again and at the end, so you all have a link to the questionnaire and the actual project website. But as always, thank you to Sean Campbell for her work in joining us on the task force to inform outreach for this really important project. So without further ado, I'll get into the agenda. So today I'm going to go over some, very baseline, what is affordable housing, definitions, for any of you that have been to some of our workshops or previous presentations. A lot of this will look really familiar, as well as the neighborhood demographics. So what we're seeing and what we observe on our end, the data is telling us at HPD about CB14. And then we'll end off with the various preservation strategies that we employ to keep folks in their homes, and end with a Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, let's begin by walking through what we mean when we say affordable housing. So housing is considered affordable when a household spends no more than a third of its income on rent and utilities. And we have here some example rents that would be affordable for these different income brackets or levels. But there are several types of affordable housing with varying levels of government regulation used to develop and keep homes affordable. Beginning with no regulation. So unregulated private market housing is not income restricted, and therefore is only affordable to some households and varies based on the local market. And then there is, sorry.
Is anyone else? Oh, there we go. The presentation was black for a little bit, but now it's back on.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're good now. Okay, so for public housing, so public housing is regulated by the federal government and a local housing agency, which for New York City, of course, is NYCHA. And this is also, this is income restricted housing. There are certain eligibility requirements for folks that live in NYCHA, and that is regulated to ensure that the families living in NYCHA are only paying a third of their income on that rent. For rent and stabilized and rent controlled housing, that is housing that was developed or built out in New York City before 1974, in which tenants are protected from sharp increases in rents and have a right to renew their lease. And so this form of housing is regulated by the state to ensure that, that it remains affordable for the folks that that live in these type of units. Then there's government assisted housing, which is a lot of the housing that HPD does, especially for our new construction housing. And these are privately owned buildings that receive public subsidy or other benefits in exchange for keeping the rents at affordable rates based on income. And the last type of affordable housing is rental assistance. So these are federal, state, and city programs which help to pay all or part of a family's rent. And these programs include things like housing choice vouchers and city FEPs, and can be used with different types of affordable housing to ensure that a family gets a supplementary income to ensure that their rent is affordable. But income restrictions and things are determined by those different government entities, and it's also regulated by those entities as well. So in order to determine if a family is eligible for certain rents, we at HPD and those that are extending affordable housing opportunities, we look at area median income, which is each year is determined by the federal government for different regions. And for the year 2021, the New York metro area was determined to have an area median income for a family of 3 of just over $107,000. So our agency, HPD, uses this number as a reference point, it's like a benchmark to understand how deeply affordable the housing that we develop and preserve needs to be affordable to New York City's different residents. So we have here some different employment and roughly what their AMIs might be, but we're aiming to create and preserve housing for folks that are making anywhere from 0% AMI to 120% AMI. And it's to kind of contextualize a little what that would mean in terms of different rental rates and the difference between HPD affordable rents to what you might see on a private unregulated market. We have here some example households, the apartment size they might be eligible for, annual incomes, so roughly how much they might make based on their AMI and the number of folks in their family, and then HPD affordable rent versus private market rents that you might find in CB14. So with that, that's where HPD comes in. Our agency, Housing Preservation and Development, promotes quality and affordable housing for New Yorkers in many neighborhoods, across neighborhoods. And HPD works to achieve that mission by preserving affordable housing and protecting tenants, developing new affordable housing, enforcing the housing maintenance code for the city, and engaging neighborhoods in planning, which is exactly what my team in ONS does. We are charged with, making sure that our future affordable housing preservation and new development is informed by meaningful engagement and coordinates with public investments in infrastructure and services. And then we also have on the line Clara Moody, who is from our Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services. And that division is charged with, again, code enforcement of the city's housing maintenance code and New York State multiple dwelling law. So E&S works closely with HPD divisions and community partners to identify distressed buildings and develop appropriate strategies to address those properties and the tenants' needs. So with that, I'm going to go a little bit into some neighborhood demographics we've observed for the Community District 14. Starting with the existing housing stock here. So most of the units in CD14 are in buildings of, with 50 units or more. So some of our bigger buildings. And of those buildings, most of them, the majority of them were built before 1947. And majority also would probably fall under that rent stabilized, rent controlled, unit mix. But this is inclusive of not only rental units, this is also just home ownership housing that is included in the district. So when we look at the types of affordable housing, given that some of the housing stock is much older here, we see that government assisted housing is just 2% here. And that government assisted housing does not include public housing because there is no public housing in CD14. However, there are just over half of the units that are rental units here are rent stabilized units, so that's a really great thing. But then looking at renters versus owners, we see that there is a higher concentration, slightly higher concentration of rental housing here, which may signal that it might be harder to attain home ownership opportunities in this district as compared to the rest of the borough and New York City as well. Then when we look at rent over time, so this is a chart showing us the increases in rental rates for the CD14 as compared to New York City and Brooklyn. So CD14 is just about on par with the rest of the city, but it's much higher compared to the rest of Brooklyn, which is something to think about in terms of, what affordable housing opportunities need to be preserved and further grown and our future opportunities to create housing here. So with that, I'll get into some of the preservation strategies that we employ as an agency to ensure that the existing housing stock that is affordable or is rent regulated remains affordable for the tenants and the homeowners here. And I should clarify, these preservation strategies are not only for rent regulated housing, it's for any tenant or homeowner that is in need of, stabilization efforts to keep, their homes or keep themselves in their homes. So starting with HPD tools to keep tenants in their home. In addition to my team, the neighborhood planning team, we also have the neighborhood education and outreach team, which is charged with, raising awareness about our different programs for tenants. And they do that through tenant resource fairs that we usually work really closely with different community organizations and community boards to organize and make sure that tenants in the area, residents are understanding of the supports that are available to them. Then our neighborhood stabilization team leads or heads up our partners in preservation programs, which is a program that looks to partner with tenant organizations to identify and raise awareness about problem buildings in an area so that they can be proactive in addressing tenant needs and ensuring that that us as an agency is aware of the tenant needs in a specific neighborhood. Then for harassment, prevention and enforcement, there's the Certificate of No Harassment pilot program, which is under review. But basically, this is a program that allows HPD to certify a building as ready and clear of harassment upon demolition, or if there is a need for building permits for renovations, HPD needs to review and affirm that there has been no tenant harassment practices in order to get that work done. So that's a partnership with the Department of Buildings as well. Then there's the speculation watch list, which allows HPD to kind of look at different neighborhoods that may be under speculation, recent sales and of buildings that might be increasing, the cost of the building to heighten the market price in the area. So HPD, regulates and understands, what buildings may not be priced appropriately in an area if there's a suspicion of speculation. Then the anti-harassment unit is a unit that we have in-house to address any complaints from tenants if they suspect that their landlord is, withholding services or like for repairs and an interest of trying to force them out of their home. And then the Tenant Harassment Prevention Task Force is an interagency effort. Aside from HPD, there's the Office of the Attorney General, Department of Buildings, Department of Health. They're all organized to go to different neighborhoods and ensure that problem buildings are receiving the supports that they need to ensure that landlords are responsive to repair needs. And this could also result in litigation against a landlord and criminal charges charged against them if they go unresponsive. And that is through the support of, on a case-by-case basis, in an effort to make sure that landlords are being responsive and delivering the services and repairs that are needed for tenants to live in quality housing. So some other tools that are available that are not headed up by HPD include eviction prevention programs, which include things like universal counsel in housing court and making sure that if a tenant is having a legal issue with their landlord, that they're represented and not being forced out of their home or evicted. Housing Court Answers provides court navigation support, so helping folks that are undergoing legal processes with their landlord understand the process. And home-based homeless prevention centers make sure that, if a family is in risk of being evicted, that they have the support they need and to ensure that, every last resort is explored to keep them in their home. Then there are rental assistance programs and rent freeze programs like One Shot Deal. These are one-time payments to ensure that emergency payments for families that can't pay their rent. There's SCREE and DREE, which are rental freeze programs through the Department of Finance that ensures that folks that are seniors and or disabled have their rental rates are frozen. And that a landlord can take advantage of tax incentives in exchange for freezing their rent at a certain affordable rate. And then again, City FEP's rental assistance is once again supplementary income to support families that may be rent burdened in a certain area. Then other tools for tenants include things like the Mayor's Office to Protect Tenants, which has a plethora of different supports and helping again tenants understand their rights and making sure that they understand that they're what their landlord has the right to do, and services like the Commission for Human Rights that make sure that if a tenant is feeling that they are discriminated against for their housing choice, that can be investigated and explored by the Commission for Human Rights. Now taking a look at homeowners. So some supports in place for homeowners include the Homeowner Help Desk. And this is staffed by in partnership with the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. And this is we work with nonprofits helping with housing counseling and legal services to ensure that if a homeowner has issues with, either tax, their tax arrears or repairs for their home, that we're helping connect them with different additional funding or counseling that is available through the city. The Zombie Homes Initiative looks at, again, and that's again through our neighborhood stabilization team. They go out to neighborhoods and track different abandoned homes or homes that are, not yet occupied, or in some cases they are occupied, but houses that may be in bad shape, and making sure that the owner or the representative there is ensuring that the home is kept up to par, so that it doesn't look in a way that is that brings down the value of the neighborhood. Then some home repair assistance includes Home Fix, and this is funding through HPD specifically for repairs in housing, especially for smaller buildings that may also have tenants, rental income coming through, to make sure that the funding is available. Low to no cost, and no interest loans are provided to homeowners to ensure that they're able to fix up their homes and stay in them, and make sure that they are of quality. And then lead hazard reduction and healthy homes program does a similar thing in making sure that lead hazards are mitigated for homeowners. Then we have some other supports that are available to the Center of New York City Neighborhoods, like financial and legal counseling if a homeowner finds themselves in foreclosure, spam prevention, which is another thing that is routed through our homeowner help desk, but in ensuring that if things like deed theft doesn't happen to homeowners. We've seen this especially with some of the older homeowners being scammed out of their homes, and to turn over their deeds. And then Protect Our Homes campaign is an initiative through once again, the Office of the Attorney General to raise awareness about deed theft and scam prevention. Then other equity models like community land trusts and shared equity models ensure that if there is home ownership on a land or an asset, that it remains affordable in perpetuity. And those type of structures are governed by residents, government officials, select government officials, usually elected officials, and a nonprofit that is created to ensure that the land and the building that is on the land is upkept to ensure affordability, but also, once again, quality housing. And then some tools to address poor housing quality specifically includes HPD's preservation loans, where property owners can apply for repair loans for major repairs and renovations. Owners have to sign a regulatory agreement committing to at least, usually 30 or more years of affordability for their tenants, and to keep them in place. And again, that's just applying some of the income regulations and rent restrictions that would be applied in some of our new construction for our preservation efforts as well. So that's an agreement with the landlord to do that. And since 2014, HPD has financed the preservation of a total of 280 units in CD14 for preservation. Then in more outreach to our property owners across the city, there's the Landlord Ambassadors Program and property owner clinics that, once again, raise awareness of these preservation loan opportunities, preservation funding opportunities, to make sure that, if landlords need help in bringing up their units to be more of quality and to extend affordability, that they know that these supports are existing through HPD. So we taken a proactive approach to ensure that property owners are aware of those supports. And then some other tools to look at housing quality include, in identifying buildings that might be distressed or might be experiencing a concentration of housing quality issues. We always tell, folks and residents in the area that may have issues that they should begin with starting by calling 311 and filing complaints if they have housing maintenance issues. And the Proactive Preservation Initiative looks to, if there is a high concentration of 311 calls in a building or an area, our team going out in ONS and some of the other divisions to ensure that there's no need for, or whether there's a need to look further into the problem in a building or an area, see if there's maybe a distressed building and housing quality issues that are prevalent. And then our vision of preservation also has a, sorry, hi, Kelvin. Hello? Okay. I think Kelvin meant to be muted. But looking at code enforcement, and I'll let Kelvin and actually Ms. Moody talk a little bit more extensively about this. But in code enforcement, HPD inspectors once again enforce the housing maintenance code by issuing violations if they see there's an issue, and making sure that landlords are aware, if they're not responsive to their tenants, that now HPD is also aware of these issues and that they should respond with those repairs needed, particularly in problematic buildings. That may include, we might take a different special enforcement approach and issue a violation to ensure that those repairs are made by the property owner. And then for those rare cases where maybe a landlord is still unresponsive to HPD's calls to give those repairs, HPD on behalf of the tenant will bring litigation against those landlords in housing court for failing to maintain their property. So. And then as a last slide, just to, before we get into some of the, the hot or more, I guess, critical adjustments of housing preservation. And I wanted to share this chart, which is really helpful to me. And I try to share out in any of these opportunities is, what happens when you call 311, exactly where does your call go? Through 311, you can say that you want to make a housing complaint. We show where that housing complaint goes. HPD is able to file that in our database and make sure that we're getting in contact with the landlord. And depending on the class of the repairs needed, we'll also send out a code inspector to take a look at it and, again, give a nudge to that property owner. So, and if it's unaddressed, you see at step 6, if a violation is found, the inspector issues a violation to the owner, and the owner must certify that the repair is made. And also the tenant needs to be okay with those repairs and make sure that they need to confirm that it's up to par. And if the violation is certified but not corrected, the tenant can challenge it, or there can be a reinspection to clear it altogether. And then if it's never certified, then we escalate it even more and try to figure out if more critical support is needed from our code inspection team. So I'll actually share this out, and I hope that as the community board can share this with some of residents that may have questions about how effective 311 is, or who do I go to, or how do I make start up that process of getting my repairs addressed. it starts with 311, and hopefully you can share this this useful graphic with them. So with that, I'll take a step back and turn it over for questions. And again, I want to introduce Claire Moody and Kelvin Gutierrez, who are a part of our ENS team, Emergency Neighborhood Services team, that can, or Enforcement and Neighborhood Services team, excuse me, who can answer some more of your questions about preservation and our efforts.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation tailored to Community District 14. I see we have a question from Sean Campbell.
Thanks, Joanne. Sorry to jump in and go first, but I just wanted to add a couple of things. I put in the chat a link to a public comment opportunity to the rent guidelines board, because they are looking at the increases that will be allowed for stabilized apartments. So please try, if you're a renter, and even if you're not, you want to protect rent stability in the community, chime in on that. And then in a minute, I'll also add a link. I think it's tonight, is the a hearing on property tax reform. So I'll get that link in there as well. But it's under the projects tab on the Community Board 14 website. And then if I can toss in a question, since I'm unmuted, or just add some context that I'd like HPD to respond to. And we've talked about this before, but we talked about the, you did a really interesting slide on renters versus owners. And it's interesting because we have slightly lower than the borough-wide, citywide average of owners, and yet our land use is majority homeowners. So our renters are really concentrated in different pockets of the district, and we rank 14th of 59 community boards in the city in terms of serious housing code violations, and 4th out of 59 in terms of overall violations. We also rank 7th in severely overcrowded units. So I just wanted to add that extra context and talk about that, and how do we better utilize the services and the enforcement capacity of HPD to improve these conditions for our renters. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Sean. And did I unmute myself? I'm good on. Can you guys hear me? Did I lose you?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my screen went blank for a second. Sorry about that. So, in terms of maintenance deficiencies, I want to I know that, and Sean, we've talked a little bit about this in the past. CD14 is actually rated at having about 10% of its housing for severe maintenance deficiencies, and we define severe maintenance deficiencies as having 3 or more of certain types of maintenance deficiencies. So that would include things like additional heating in the winter, heating or cracks and holes in a wall, rodents in a building, toilet breakdown. So there's certain classes of maintenance deficiencies that we measure as like being more critical to housing quality, and for CD14, based on those critical needs, it ranks at about 10% of the homes here. But that doesn't mean that some of the other issues that homeowners or tenants are facing are not important. They just may be rated in a different class, and we try to look at and try to address the things that are the most severe first to ensuring housing quality. But again, if you are seeing, and why I wanted to share the 311 graphic as well, if you're seeing other, even if it's less severe maintenance deficiencies, or experiencing that if a resident is experiencing that in their home, those should be reported as well, because we keep record every time someone is calling. A participant
has joined the meeting.
Okay, we keep record every time someone is calling 311 about a specific make sure that that is on our radar. So again, trying to take that proactive preservation approach. Does that answer your question, Sean?
It's helpful. Thank you.
So I wanted to, I don't see any hands right now, so I'll ask my question. So on every Facebook group that I go to between CB9 and CB14 and, you know, areas where people are looking for affordable housing, the question about AMI comes up, mysterious AMI. So can you expand a little bit about where that number is generated? Often people refer to, there are counties outside of New York City that are included that number. I think a lot of folks, when they see this presentation, will be quite surprised to see that 100% of the AMI is $107,000 for a family of 3. So I just, for this presentation and in perpetuity, wanted people to get a better understanding of how that number is calculated.
Sure, and thank you for raising that. So, and it's a question we receive often. So AMI, once again, is, or area median income, is determined each year by the federal government. That's something that that the Department of Housing, the Department of Housing and Urban Development determines each year for every region. And for the New York City metro region, yes, it includes some municipalities outside of the city. However, once an area reaches what we call a high cost area, and that's again determined by the federal government, municipal housing agencies are able to tailor that and as an indicator for more need for affordable housing. So again, HPD is just using this number as a benchmark to help our counterparts in the state and the federal government understand that more of the residents of New York City specifically need more affordable housing. So when we get, when we're using that money for preservation efforts and new construction, we're looking at that as a benchmark to say how deeply affordable we need to get to in order to address the needs of New Yorkers specifically.
Great, thank you so much for that answer. And I also just want to say congratulations on creating 30 years of affordable, of 280 homes in this district that are now, you know, for 30 years will be affordable to the tenants that live there and beyond.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. I was really surprised at that number. I see Glenn Wallen has a hand up. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you. First, let me say that's a really thorough presentation. Thank you very much. But I do have 2 questions. One is, do you know how the federal government comes up with the AMI? You know, that's the first one. And the second one is, I think I saw one of the charts we were talking about the amount of the cost of rentals, and said that Community Board 14 was much higher than everyone else. But I didn't get a good look at it. It looked to me like $1,400 a month for that example was what it was, and in Brooklyn, Community Board 14, it was $1,450. And I'd just like to clarify that, because that's a 3.5% differential, which is significant for many people, but it's not large. So I'm not sure if I was correct on that.
And I just want to make sure I'm clear. Is it are you asking about the rental rates in the district?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Let me just pull that back up, that graphic for you. Is this the image? Oh, there. Oh, for the rent over time. So sorry about that. This one.
That one. Yes.
So I'm sorry. Can you ask that question again? Just want to make sure I'm addressing it appropriately.
Because it looks like the rents in Brooklyn are lower than CD14, right? You've got that pretty high as opposed to Brooklyn in general. But if I'm reading this right, Brooklyn in general is at $1,400, and CD14 is a little under $1,450. And
right.
Yeah, it's just because you categorized it as being much higher or something like that. And okay,
yeah,
that's because that's 3.5%, 3% higher, which is significant for some people, but it's not much higher. Okay, that's
right.
all. Good to see. Thank you. But do you know how the federal government comes up with their AMI numbers?
I know that it's reviewed every year based on you know, our income taxes and just determining you know, the gross incomes of all the folks that are included in that New York City metro region. Not exactly sure like the practice behind it, but we reevaluate it each year, and it changes or increases each year, usually based on, you know, we use usually 3-person household averages, like how much a 3-person household would be. But yeah, I would assume it's based on, you know, gross income from reported through taxes.
Thank you very much.
I have a question from the chat, also about AMI. The question is, are counties outside of New York City, such as Long Island, included in the calculation of AMI?
For the New York City metro area, yes, it is. It includes, I believe, Westchester and Rockland, and I think one other, I'm not specifically sure, but it's important not to focus so much on, you know, the AMIs or how those counties impact, you know, that level, because once again, AMI for New York City specifically is used as a benchmark, just to understand how deeply affordable we need to get to make it, you know, for New Yorkers specifically.
Okay, that's really good to know, especially, you know, when the question continues to come up in social media when people are talking about housing and new developments and trying to understand whether a new project is going to actually be affordable for them. It's good for people like me and to understand that the number that they're seeing, the AMI levels, are actually reflective of New York City and not a county outside, because it's been adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any questions? You're all so quiet today. Are you eating lunch?
It's a lunch and learn, right?
It's lunch and learn. I have a hand up from Greg Alvarez. Go ahead, Greg. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne, and thank you for the presentation as well. Very helpful. Just one question on one of the other slides where you had identified that the housing stock in CB14 is particularly old. I thought I saw that one, that a good percent, you know, a high percentage or a higher percentage of the housing stock is, there it is, built before 1947. Is that something, you know, does that create any sort of issues or you know, particular problems or things that we should be aware of that, you know, that you may see, you know, occurring in our district as opposed to other districts?
Yeah, and so I should note that we do a housing vacancy survey alongside the census that tells us, that gives us this information and helps us understand, you know, what are the available just housing opportunities in each area. But I would say, you know, for older buildings, you could suspect that there possibly could be more maintenance issues, and especially for if these are housing for the rental housing, you know, if they're older, they may be rent stabilized, but maybe because they're rent stabilized, there's not as much support for that landlord to make, you know, the useful repairs and quality to ensure quality housing. So not that it's an excuse. Landlords should definitely, that they are tasked with ensuring quality housing for all their tenants, no matter how old their building is. But I would imagine for some of these older buildings, that's maybe why you're seeing some of those complaints, those housing or maintenance deficiency complaints that Sean spoke of a little bit earlier.
Right. And you said also that in the district there were the number of I don't know if it was per unit or number per building.
Has joined the meeting.
No. Where there were, you know, a higher percentage of units that experience, you know, a higher level of violations. I think you had mentioned that before. I was just wondering if there was any correlation between that and, you know, the fact that the housing stock is a little bit older.
And I'm not sure, I'll be honest, I'm not sure exactly of, the number or the class of violations you might be seeing in CD14. That's something we could look into further. Sorry for the sirens. But I would imagine that, yes, it's probably related to this older housing stock, and then the needs that come from that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question in the chat, and then I see Glenn has his hand up, and then I want to be able to give you an opportunity to talk about the the formerly African Ground Project. So we'll take the question from the chat, and then from Glenn Wallen, and then we'll get to hear about this this project that you're working on. So the question from the chat is: does HPD audit tenants of rent stabilized buildings to find out if the rent they are paying is in line with regulatory limits? Or are landlords able to self-certify to maintain rent stabilized status?
So that is actually an oversight task that lives with New York State, the Department of Housing and Community Renewal. Each year, landlords have to certify how many of their units, if not all, are rent stabilized or income restricted, and making sure that they remain that way. So that's for rent stabilized units. And then for HPD, we look at the income restricted units that we're financing and have the regulatory agreements attached to.
And then our last question will be from Glenn Wallen. Go ahead, Glenn.
I just wanted to point out under this chart that's in front of me, the existing housing stock, where you have when things were built. The three numbers that you have on this chart do add up to 100%, but you're leaving out 1973 to 2000. So I think that something is left out here.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So there is no housing units reported for that time, oddly. But we broke this out because the units from 1947 to 1973 are the rent controlled units. So there's a slight difference. There's a rent stabilized unit law and a rent control unit law that are slightly different, but in practice allow for the same thing. And then between 1973 and 2000, we don't have any data to show that there were units added to this area for during that time.
Okay, thank you very much.
And so now I'd like to have Uriah talk about the project that's going on at the corner of Church Avenue and Bedford Avenue, which is and great importance to the district. I think you're muted, Uriah, possibly.
About that. So, and I just want to also add to the chat the questionnaire, and also before I go ahead and share again, the website where you can find out more about the project. So I don't want to talk your ear off on all of the robust, just different details that have been, created out of our outreach on the project. And I'll add the website in a second. But this should show you once to restate and to plug the community questionnaire once again. Or before I even talk about that, so back in October 2020, the council member Matthew Eugene and the mayor, announced that the site was being viewed for affordable housing development, and also would include some space for youth services, and which led to the formation of the Flatbush African Burial Ground Redevelopment Task Force. And this is comprised of different community leaders in the area, teachers, some certain churches, cultural organizations that were to ask them how best to engage with the neighborhood and what it desires to see to further inform affordable housing options that could be here in the future, and also those youth services. So we've had several task force meetings, and then just at the top of May held the first community workshop that was on site, honoring the site and memorialization, what folks in the community in general public would like to see, done with the site to commemorate its history as an African burial ground. And then the second workshop was just this last Saturday, was to talk about a little bit more about the affordable housing. But to provide a little bit more background, and again, a lot of these details are admittedly better conveyed on our project website. The site, a portion of it, just at the corner of Bedford and Church Avenue, a portion of it was identified through map findings as being a part of an African burial ground that was, used in the area through the 1840s. So we came to understand that human remains were found at the site back in 2001. And from there, an archaeological investigation ensued to discover those map findings. So fast forward to 2020, or 2017, I should say, there was an elementary school formerly there, and those of you in the area probably already know, that was demolished, and the site has been sitting vacant since then. So the council member and the mayor and trying to address affordable housing needs in this area of Brooklyn and citywide are looking to develop affordable housing here. But we also don't want to turn away from that, very significant history of this being an African burial ground back in the 1800s. So, and asking folks to, if they weren't able to join the two community workshops, to one, get caught up on the site details on the project website. You can also view what was discussed in those workshops on the website, and also in the task force meetings. Those were all live streams for the general public to sit in on and understand, where our thinking is, or what feedback we're receiving from the community, and understanding how to best develop the site. But then also to fill out this community questionnaire, which also details and asks questions about affordability, needs for non-residential uses in the area. So whether that be, wanting to see things like a community center or open space or other things that could be incorporated into the site planning and site planning and proposal for the site in the future. So all of this feedback that we're receiving will become a part of a recommendations report that will inform the formation of the request for proposals to develop the housing and the non-residential services here. And we're also looking into how to, further engage the community past that RFP being released, alongside the task force, to ensure that the design of this building and the use of this space in the future really addresses the needs and the desires of the folks that live here. So I can answer any questions you have about those our outreach efforts so far, but I really encourage you to please go on and learn more about the project and the map findings and the different things that have been discussed in the previous workshops, to understand the full weight of this project. So.
Right, and we intend to have you back many, many more times as the project progresses, so that we can get an update from you, and hear about how the community is engaging with the task force and what their wants and needs are. So we're also better informed about that. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Barden Brisson has a question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Go ahead, Barden.
Sorry, I hate to keep everyone a minute late. I had to run off and do something for a client, but I wanted to revisit something that you'd said earlier, which is that HPD has preserved 280 units in the last 7 years in CB14, which averages out to just like 40 units a year, which in light of the fact that we are disproportionately renters as opposed to owners, seems, you know, we should be able to do better. And I'd like to know how that compares to us and vis-a-vis the rest of Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd have to, you know, back in data gathered through our housing vacancy survey to see exactly, you know, how it compares to the rest of the borough and the city. But yes, that, you know, 280 is to Joanne's point, is really great for 280 households. But we hope to do more and would love to, you know, do things like raise awareness to property owners that may be in need of preservation funding to continue to grow that amount of regulation and support to the tenants in the area. So not a great answer, but I want to ensure that, you know that is something we have the same goal, to grow the amount of preservation and new housing opportunities in this area.
Yeah, just in light of how COVID has exacerbated, you know, so many people's problems, anything that
Absolutely.
we can do to move that forward would be fabulous. So just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Joanne and Sean, if I could just quickly barge in to piggyback on that, you know, Barden, a good question. And we're lucky to be able to work with community-based organizations who do this great outreach and work with HPD, such as FDC, because Robin Redmond is on this call. I want to appreciate her and acknowledge the time she's taken to join us. It looks like she may have had to jump off, but she's been at a few of these. And then NHS is another one of our community partners that does great work on this as well. And I just also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge what a good job HPD has done on the community outreach, because your Saturday public workshop had like 90, I think 80 some people on it, 90. It was a really great showing on a Saturday morning that was beautiful outside. So keep up the good work on that.
Thank you, Sean. And we want more. We want to hear more from residents about, you know, what we can do and helping them understand how we develop and maintain housing. So again, thank you for this platform to explain a little bit more about our preservation work, because that workshop was a lot more about, you know, new construction, and we welcome opportunities to do that. So thank you once again.
Well, everyone, Mr. Roy Johnson, neighborhood planner, Housing Preservation and Development, thank you again so much for being our partner and doing this presentation for us. Thank you, Clara Moody, also from HPD. Let me just thank District Manager Sean Campbell and for her, constant innovation on how we can provide educational opportunities for the residents of Community Board 14. And thank you to Anya Hoyer and Brian Williams, who are supporting this call from the staff office. Thank you to everyone who attended. I hope you'll be here next week. That's June 3rd. That'll be the 4th installment. And if you need a link to that, you can find it on the CB14 website. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and I hope to see you next week.